Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of the Bookweaver's Quill. We're so happy to have you here. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment because your feedback helps us to bring you better content.
Today is all about best friends, whatever form they come in, however long you've had them, whatever age they are. We can have best friends at their different ages and things like that. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're also going to read a couple of excerpts from the different things that we've written, and just to highlight some of the things that how we incorporated best friends into some of the storylines that we've had. I kept thinking about Toad and Frog
Mm, mhm, mhm.
because I remember reading that to the kids when they were growing up. And Toad and Frog were such good friends, but
Yeah.
they were totally opposite.
Mhm.
It's
I
cool.
read that to Jensen.
Do you really
I
right now?
do. Yeah. Yeah.
Friend.
I love those stories.
Yeah, very, very good. And Winnie the Pooh, and
Hmm.
Christopher Robin, and yeah, so best friends are really a very important part of our individual development.
Hmm.
And so for the writers that are here with us today, that's one of the things we're trying to explore is how do our characters develop as we're writing our stories? And all of us know that sometimes our characters become our friends as we are writing. And sometimes they really morph into having a mind of their own and they take us on an adventure which we had not planned at all.
It's funny,
Not-
like what I try to do on TikTok as Stella Jade, so not as Stephanie Milan, but Stella Jade is I'm always doing those little meme videos. And in the video, I do a lot about the characters and how they rule us, they push us, they talk to us, and a lot of them are very much like having this friend who's basically making all your decisions for you. So it's just funny. I was thinking
yeah,
about that.
yeah. I can remember one of the very first stories I wrote. I was sitting in my laundry room. I had an old typewriter, which was very hard on the ears. But I can remember sitting there and writing, and all of a sudden it was just like, she did what? It was like I was watching what my character was doing. I'll never forget that. It was such an exciting time. I loved that. I loved that. Well, Steph, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your excerpt first. Would
Sure.
you like to set up just a little bit of background before I do?
Sure. My mind just totally went blank for a minute and I was like, what passage did I give her? But this point is
It's late.
where where Lizzie and her best friend have had a falling out. So her best friend is a girl named Misty, and she doesn't like Lizzie's boyfriend. So this is something that a lot of girlfriends go through, I think. And she doesn't like Lizzie's boyfriend. She thinks he's controlling and he's love bombing her, and most importantly, that he's stealing Lizzie away from her. And then an event occurs where Miles, who is the boyfriend, buys tickets for concert tickets for Lizzie to a group called Sandalwood Owls. They're very popular. They're a boy band. And it just happens to be Lizzie and Misty's favorite boy band that they grew up together listening to, going to concerts. And he bought the tickets on a night that she was supposed to be hanging out with Misty. So this is another night that she's canceled on her friend to go to this concert with Miles. And it's this group that they both love. So this is the aftermath of this. They've had a fight, and now Misty has agreed to meet with Lizzie, and That's it.
Mhm. All right, so here we go. Lizzie bit the inside of her lip as she picked at her eggs and French toast. Was Misty going to say anything? I can't say I'm sorry enough, Lizzie said. But you know it's not about that, replied Misty. She sat with her arms folded, her back against the red seat of the oakened high back booth. The corners of her thin lips tipped slightly forward in a permanent frown. Misty gazed at her food, at her phone, out the window, everywhere except into Lizzie's eyes. Anyone in New Jersey knew this face was called resting bitch, and it could mean a girl was angry. She was lost in her thought about something, or it was a day that ended in Y. In this case, Misty was angry. I messed up, Misty. This is like the fifth time in a few months, and whatever, I get it. Your boyfriend surprises you with some experience that's more fun than hanging out with your friends. Misty rolled her eyes. He's more fun than me. You can just say it. Stop. The thing that gets me, Lizzie, is that it was a Sandalwood Owl concert. Our boys. Finn freaking Broder. Lizzie, how would you feel if I did that to you? I know, Lizzie replied in a low, soft voice. If it makes you feel any better, it was the worst night of my life. That doesn't. Lizzie let out a deep sigh. I was wrong, Misty. I was, and I see it now. I hear you. I'm not going to do that to you again. I love you too much, and your friendship is too special to me. Misty didn't respond right away, but when she did, she replied, okay, apology accepted. Thank you. Unavoidable tears stung Lizzie's eyes, and she dabbed them with her napkin. Okay, I didn't mean to make you cry or anything, Misty said. I just wanted you to beg a little for my forgiveness. I'm not crying because of that. Oh no? What's wrong? Everything.
Great job.
Yeah, it's well written.
Thank you. Thank you.
Written.
Very raw.
Yeah. Mhm.
I feel like that experience is something that a lot of um, young people experience, older people experience with their friends. Anyway, the thing about Lizzie is that she's always the first to apologize. And a lot of times I feel, because I'm very close to this character, that she shouldn't be.
Mhm.
And in this case, I think it's warranted because Misty is very disappointed that her friend is canceled. And I think ultimately Misty would never abandon her friend, except I'm not giving any spoilers away, but if you read the second book, they definitely have a bigger rift. But um, I do think in this case that it's nice to show that friendship, how Misty even says, like, I didn't mean to make you cry or anything. I was just making you beg a little, almost like, well, you know I would never, give up on you as a friend. And I think that shows in that passage about their friendship.
Mhm. Steph, did you draw on any of your own experiences?
Yeah, I actually did have that experience a lot with someone that I dated a lot.
Mhm.
But it does affect your friendships when the person that you're with isn't compatible with your friends, and then everything that you're doing seems to it's almost like friction. There's this constant friction rubbing against um, between your friends and this person. And it just creates a dynamic where you feel like you're pushing against your friendships.
Mhm.
And the people who love you stand by you. I had one friend who basically said, that she caused trouble because she was jealous I had a boyfriend. So that's another dynamic that I think people go through. And then there were other friends who were concerned for, like Misty, where they just didn't care for certain behaviors. And then that was the catalyst that brought some of these situations about where then you found yourself saying, oh, I was trying to keep my relationship and keep that afloat, but then I'm also trying to do that with my relationships, and it just causes tension. And I think it just brings a lot of unsettling emotions to the person. And ultimately, when that either your friends will stay with you and they stick with you, which I'm very lucky to have really lovely friends, and we're still friends so many years later. And sometimes friendships dissipate because it's just situations, circumstances. So,
Yeah, natural attrition.
mhm,
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I often think about the writers for various sitcoms that are on TV that dealt with specifically relationships between people who were friends, or, at least in the script are. Uh, Certainly pulling up the one about Friends itself,
mhm,
although it was a sitcom, a comedy, they did touch on some uh, different things that happen, different riffs that happen and how you can get hurt through that. Certainly, all of the daytime soap operas
mhm,
definitely deal a lot with friendships or perceived friendships, and how betrayal gets in there and everything
mhm.
along that line. And I would like to go ahead, if it's okay, and read from Jackie's book, which is, Jackie, you can set it up. But I found, there's in your excerpt, there is a betrayal. There is again, just like Steph's, there's a little bit of anger here, a little bit of annoyance and having to deal with it. So would you like to set up the
Yes. So this book is actually a an adult book. It's not a young adult. Usually I write young adult, but this was my first book. And it is called Emit, a Modern Myth. And if you look at the word emit, which is a theme during the book, if you look at it backwards, it spells out time. And the entire concept of the book is on the idea, it's actually a metaphysical book talking about time and the things that can happen in time. And this passage in particular deals with the main character, which is a small boy who travels through time, which we don't know if he really travels in time until the end of the book. I won't do any spoilers, but he travels through time, and at one point he comes across his so-called best friend from childhood when who he believes should also be 6 years old, but this boy has continued to grow, whereas the main character, Robbie Flynn, has not.
okay. Take me to my dad now, or else. I threatened, sticking the shovel out sword-like in front of me. Willie's shoulders hunched up. Fine. He ducks into the trap door and disappears down the ladder. Are you coming or not? He calls up. Willie slides a loose band from the bottom of the shed before putting it back in its place. Key in hand, he opens the shed and disappears inside. A minute later, the neighborhood houses are blurring together. White-knuckled, I clutch into the handlebars for dear life as Willie pedals into the night. Outside of the neighborhood, Willie picks up the pace. The wind is hitting my face so hard that my eyes close against their will. In the end, it's the rich scent of dried clay that helps me get my bearings. The familiar scent envelops me like a cocoon. I smile. Once I find Dad, everything will be better. Dad knows how to fix everything. But my reverie is short-lived. I guess I wasn't prepared for Willie to hit the brakes. Robbie, are you okay? As my vision clears, Willie stands over me, hand outstretched. But I didn't reach for it. The bowing archway looms above our heads, with its pair of hand-holding angels dangling below the words, Cornea Cemetery. My body's paralyzed. My mind's not in much better shape. You asked me to take you. My brain defogs gradually. Wait, no. I'm sorry. No, you're not sorry, I screamed. My dad's not dead. Willie leaves me sobbing on the ground. He leans his bike up against the high arched wall and retreats cautiously into the graveyard. When my tears finally run dry, I push myself to my feet. I follow the lone ray of Willie's flashlight until we're standing side by side. He tilts the beam downward, allowing it to illuminate the moss-ridden stone. My dad's name is written on it. Something invisible kicks the air out of me. I fall to my knees, whispering feebly, "It can't be." I'm sorry, Robbie. He puts his large hand on my small one. I know it's him. I watched them put him down there. Rivers of tears and snot stream down my face. I don't try wiping them away. You were there? Willie nods. Tell me what happened. He plops down beside me. It all started a day or two after the fair. All these men in green suits came, asking lots of questions. I was young. He looked at me reluctantly before continuing. I didn't understand what was happening. Mom told me to go to my room. So, of course, I hid behind the bolster to listen. I heard them saying they found your dad. And he was alive. He was hurt badly, but alive. The first thing he did was ask about you. You were supposed to. His voice trails off. I finish Willie's sentence. I was supposed to be playing with you. Oh, yeah. I got choked up when I was reading that before. I started to cry. Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, it's powerful. So, Jackie,
So,
what I was going to ask you, so where did you pull that from? I mean, because it's very rich.
um, I think we all have, I think it's kind of attached to what Stephanie said earlier about sometimes having friends that you are able to weather the storm with, and then other ones that you lose. And I think that this particular passage I pulled through, now these two characters have grown apart because of age, but it's their ages that are different. But I think it's the same message that we have when a lot of times you'll have a friend that will either, like I have no children, but I have friends that have children. And sometimes during that period of having their children, they just don't have time because it's normal. They have tons of things to do. And it's like your life will take you on separate paths. And I've always been told that real friends, the paths will converge at the end. But during those middle times when you feel so separated from people that you once cared about because of changes, physical changes, mental changes, lifetime changes, you can feel really, really separated. And at this particular moment, for me, it's two friends that are coming back together for the first time in a long time after these changes that we all go through.
Mhm.
And something that I appreciated about that passage was when when he first tells him that his father's dead, and then Robbie reacts, it's like Willie doesn't comfort him. He kind of just lets him be
Mhm.
and just goes into the cemetery. which then he changes his tune more when they finally get to the grave, and then you see Willie comfort him, almost like, they're separate here, and now they're bridging their relationship back together here. So I thought that was really beautifully done. And this passage reminds me of a book that I used to love growing up called The Adventure of Tycho. Have you guys ever read that book?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
I'm gonna send it to you. But it's a time traveling book. Your book is not like that book is creepy. Your book is not. But I read it so many times. This is probably why I write what I write. But yeah, it's just the time traveling aspect of it and him being young. Those were the similarities that I drew between that and having a hard time looking at something that has happened that because of that experience. So just throw
Cool.
that in there because I love that book.
Very much so. Very much so. They're both beautiful experiences that the two of you have put down on paper. And again, for the writers that are, part of this podcast, as far as listening and sending in comments, we'd love you to share some of the things that you've written about best friends and what it elicited from you as you were in fact writing it, and what you hoped to share slash um, have your readers experience in a very deep, deep way. All right, so I'm going to jump in and I'll read an excerpt from the young adult uh, YA fiction that I'm working on, and it's called Only When She Reads. And the whole premise of this book is, which I had read a little bit of last in our second episode, is a young girl named Ruthie, and her brother is Rudy. But in this particular passage, Ruthie is talking to her best friend, Celine. And Ruthie does have a secret that's in her life, but she doesn't understand what the secret is. And this is the beginning paragraph before she talks about what really goes on. Okay, here we go. Some days, school seems to drag on forever. Today was one of those days. So I was secretly happy when Mr. Howard asked me to give out the science folders before class. At least I wasn't stuck sitting in a desk. Well, at least for a few minutes anyway. As I finished handing out the last folder and started walking toward my desk, I saw my best friend Celine standing outside the door in the hallway, waving for me to come out. Walking quickly, I passed my desk, focusing on her outstretched hand. She grabbed mine and pulled me toward the lockers across the hall. Ruthie, did you hear about Toby? Celine whispered, looking around to make sure no one was coming down the hall. She leaned closer, continuing to whisper in my ear. Mr. Jeffries found him in the bathroom punching out Brett Howard. They say Toby looked like he was like some kind of robot on automatic pilot, punching Brett over and over, shouting, You're never going to talk about my mom like that again. The school bell, which was right above my head, startled me. I slapped my hands over my ears to block out as much as the sound as I could. Celine's mouth kept moving, but I couldn't hear a word she was saying. Mr. Howard walked into the hallway and gave us that "you better get in here now" look. Celine grabbed my hand and squeezed it twice, which I knew was her way of saying, "We'll talk later." It's funny, being friends since first grade, Celine and I can talk without ever using our voices. So I liked this scene because Celine is so free-spirited, so into everything. She sees everything, she hears everything, she wants to share everything. She's just a really free spirit. Whereas Ruthie is very observational and she's very sensitive.
Hmm.
She approaches her life in a very sensitive way. And both of them being seventh graders, I mean, that is the time where we really begin to understand what friendships really mean. I mean, through grade school, but it's usually between fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade that it's that middle school experience
Mm.
that can make or break us as adults for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So I like this excerpt very much, and I like the two characters. And what I hope to do with it is just to give everyone that does get a chance to read it the sense of what did form our foundation for friendship,
Mm.
what also broke us apart that we play over again. Can you tell I'm a counselor? You're truly, because a lot of people come, it goes back to those years. It goes
Yeah.
back to years. So
I First of
Like,
all, that writing was beautiful, and the part that I loved the visual of the robot. Like I mean, not that, I just see this guy like punching this guy, and also the the being able to speak to your friend without saying words, because that's just, I mean, especially I know with my friends or, my best friends, like we look at each other, we could just talk to each other in that way. And I'm also thinking about when I was younger and I broke my ankle. I had a set of friends and I broke my ankle right at a time when I was going into seventh grade. And so I didn't start school with everyone. I
oh,
had a tutor and I was home for the first 3 months because I had to get this like massive surgery, or maybe it was 2 months, I don't know, but it was this massive surgery. So I had a tutor, and when I went back to school, none of my friends were my friends anymore. Like they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And I remember how awful that felt. It just felt like first of all, I started off with in a wheelchair and then with crutches, and it was already hard to do that and start a new school and a new grade, and then to also like lose all your friends, and it was just really difficult. But I'm really thankful that just you reading that brought all of that up for me. But I'm really thankful because I wouldn't give my friends up for anything, but it just was very just a crazy experience, and I didn't think about it until I heard that, and now I'm like, "Oh gosh, that was pretty traumatic."
it is. Yeah, that middle school time in our lives
Mhm.
really sets a precedence for quite a lot of adult experiences.
mhm. Yes, I agree. I feel like that passage for me, I love the same parts that Stephanie said, especially the second part with just the feeling, being able to communicate without the words. Um, but I felt like that passage was such a good example of like the things that friends will do for each other, even when you're not supposed to. Like sneaking out into the hall. And I feel like a lot of times our best friendships are based upon these kinds of things, like the things that you're doing together that you're not supposed to be doing, maybe breaking the rules and getting away with it, or sometimes not getting away with it and getting put into like Saturday school or something. Like some of my friends are from these like random moments that you just are like, how did that even happen, you know?
Mhm.
So I thought that this was like a really powerful example of how sometimes it is important to, for young people, I'm not saying to break the law, but to step outside of what has been told and to do what is right,
Mhm.
because sometimes the actual, say, school rules are just meant, or a certain set of rules are meant to keep people into order, but they don't take into account these types of circumstances, and how in this particular passage, it's like you see the main characters like growing up in front of the
Yeah,
through the words
yeah.
and taking these choices and stuff.
I appreciate that feedback very much so. Two of my favorite movies, which of course the one was a book, but is the Dead Poets Society.
Mm. Mhm.
So,
Now they're much older, they're in high school, and but it's so raw. just so raw, just becoming, again, how do you navigate the different feelings that you experience? And the Dead Poets Society, excuse me, is just very, very well written, as is The Breakfast Club.
Mhm.
Oh, if I've watched that movie once, I've watched it, I can't tell you how many times. And that was a group of young adults, all of whom had been going through different things. I mean, high school people who had found themselves, Jackie, as you just said, in circumstances where they had to go to Saturday school. And they didn't like each other. They were a group of people that had passed in the hallway but wouldn't talk to one another because they were all in different groups. And to watch how they get to know one another and
Mhm.
oh,
Right.
love it.
Just yeah, best friend or friendship, it's like we said earlier with the spider, it's like you don't necessarily choose. Sometimes like friendship falls upon you or,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's those moments in time. Those moments in time. Yeah. So there are 3 excerpts for today. And again, we ask writers and or listeners to send us your comments and talk to us about an experience that you might like to share about a best friend and how it might have shaped you up till this time, or how it might be a wound that you still carry, about friendships.
So, just from the viewpoint of writing, I did have a couple questions for you guys. So, one is how is this topic, this theme, relevant to you as it pertains to writing and publishing? I know I have some ideas about that, but this idea of friendship, or best friend, how is that relevant to your writing and publishing as well? Who'd like
would
to
you
go
like this?
first?
Who would like?
Jackie, I think Anna Marie's looking
Oh,
at you.
okay. Couldn't tell on the screen. Yeah, so definitely. I think even in the last episode, I was talking about the journey that you go on when you go through the publishing process. And since I mentioned that, I think I'll just talk about the writing process in and of itself, because I believe that most people are their own worst critic. And as we're writing, there's so much out there, and there's so many, just like Anne Marie said earlier, sometimes you have an idea for your character, and he or she may or may not want to do what you're asking them to do. So as you're going through this process, it's like sometimes you may try to force them. Sometimes it may work, sometimes it may not. They might be a little bit more, you know, pig-headed than you are, your character, and they might win out. And then there comes a point where you have, you versus yourself, and you're like, okay, does that make me a good writer? Does that make me a bad writer? Am I, keeping my characters in context and in their personalities? Is that, a good thing, or, should I be forcing them? And there comes a point where you have to decide whether or not you're going to be your own friend as you're writing, because sometimes you might feel bad about the way that things are turning out, the way that your chapter has gone. Sometimes you have to also be kind to yourself and or honest with yourself, like friends often are. Sometimes you want to love that, or you may love that paragraph or that chapter, but it has no place in that book anymore, and you have to be able to let go of it, like sometimes happen with friends. And so I think it is friendship wise, it's important to know how to be your own, be kind with yourself as a writer when you're writing.
Right.
Mm.
And I agree with what you've said. As a writer, it's a very lonely experience. And you have to be able to be comfortable with the loneliness
Mhm.
because you have to extract yourself from the normal pace of your life in order to make time to sit down and write. And I found that some of your friends might not understand that you can't go
Mhm.
to X, Y, or Z because you need to take that time. You know,
Sure.
love the TED Talk that Elizabeth Gilbert gives about the muse, the creative muse. It's a beautiful TED Talk. So if anyone hasn't seen it, it would be a good thing to watch it. She does a beautiful job. But you do need to extract yourself. And but I don't think unless you're in that creative flow, I don't think people really understand the excitement that you get because you, the writer or creative individual, when you get into the flow of what you're doing, you're with a best friend.
Hmm.
And that is yourself as creative spirit.
Hmm.
And as Elizabeth says in her TED Talk, you are right there with the muse. So it's a whole different dynamic. And it really transcends this linear plane because you are then in this ethereal place. And as a writer, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, sometimes it just comes over you and you are just immersed in this world that consciously that you're creating, but honest to heaven, when you're in the flow, it is creating you. You are not creating it,
Hmm.
which might sound very wacky, but that's exactly what it is. You are not, it's just
Hmm.
coming through. So I love that. Addicted to that feeling. I love
Hmm.
it. You
Yeah.
just, whoa. So I think a lot of creative individuals, especially writers, find themselves in that space and place. So, yes, you're isolated at times, but it is in a world that's just magnificent. Yeah.
Sure. I think that I would like to just talk about it from the aspect of publishing. First of all, I'm also addicted to that feeling as well. And writing the second book and it's coming to a close, I have looked back at this and I'm like, wow, I did not do this. Like, I did it, but I did not do this. Like, these characters, they've created themselves, and I was just here for this experience and this ride. And it's funny because sometimes I'll be like, I'll even, say to Jackie and Andrea, who are kind enough to be reading this book, I'm like, yeah, I have to change this. Like, this character didn't want to do this. So, this character didn't want to be that mean. So, I have to change it. But anyway, from the publishing perspective, when you talk about the writer's journey being lonely, and also if you are an indie author and even as somebody who helps, with Milan Book Publishing, helping indie authors to publish, that point where the book is published, most people don't understand the lonely journey that begins the moment that that book is published. And we do it because we love it, right? We love the feeling. That feeling is also addicting. You have a book in your hands and you can go out to people and you can be like, look at my book, and you can do all these cool things with it and it's great. And people are like, wow. But it is a lonely journey because you have to find the avenues that will best get your book out to people, find readers for your people. So now you have this, let's say it's a masterpiece, but you have to find readers for it. And you have to, put it out there in the right way to get to people. And that process in itself is a pretty lonely process, and you have to be your own best friend because there are a lot of people who might give you criticism or who might not be as supportive of you as you hoped they would be, and they tend to be people that are closest to you, right? And I've seen it a million times, and I have a lot of friends on TikTok, and I listen to these indie authors talking about this process, and most people are saying the same exact thing. And I think there's this understanding that you have to be your biggest advocate, your your own best friend, and you have to cut out the noise to do this process and to do it properly and to do it effectively. So, from the publishing standpoint, I would say that's what I try to do, and that would be my advice to anybody who's doing that. cut out the noise and be your own best friend and nurture that relationship and pat yourself on the back for how far you've already come because you've done something that a lot of people wish to do that have not done it. And now you are moving into the next phase of that, which is to get it into the reader's hands that where it belongs. So
Right, right, very much so.
those are
And
my
yeah,
15 cents on that.
yeah, and I'd like to reiterate that that's something that we really strongly encourage anyone that hears this podcast, be it writer, be it creative of any sort,
Mhm.
um, or just the listeners who, have chanced upon this, really share with us because that's what friends do. And that's why Steph and Jackie and I decided to start these podcasts because we really want to share our journey, but hear the journeys of you enrich us by sharing what you are going through. It enriches our lives very much so. And isn't that what we're all here for? To enrich one another's lives and celebrate what's going on.
Sure.
So, make sure you do like,
Mhm.
subscribe, but most
Comment.
importantly, most importantly, comment.
Sure.
That's what we're really looking for. That interaction, that connection is really what we're all about.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for episode 3 of the Bookweaver's Quill. And be sure to tune in next time for episode 4. And we look forward to seeing your comments and bringing you more content. Thank you.